I think we should start, right? It's 8:50, so I will not repeat the same opening statements for housekeepings that I made, because most people were here for it, so they heard it. But we will repost into the chat the housekeeping rules, so to say. And then, so let's just start, right? Dear ladies and gentlemen, let's restart the next session of the forum. We're now here for session 2 on the theme, and I would like to hand over to Ms. Juliet Braslow, Economic Affairs Officer at the Office of the Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for moderation of the session. Juliet, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the 5th North and Central Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, Session 2, the sub-regional discussion on perspectives of the Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development and high-level political forum theme of 2022, which is building back better from COVID-19 while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Asian Development Bank, United Nations Development Program, and the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific are organizing this dialogue to identify North and Central Asian challenges and development priorities, and to brainstorm and share cooperation measures and good practices that will support the subregion to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and to continue progress towards achieving the SDGs. The discussion points will feed into the thematic report, the thematic priorities of and examples shared in the 2022 Asia-Pacific Sustainable Development Goals Partnership Report. This report will explore trajectories for resilient and inclusive recovery in social and environmental dimensions, with specific emphasis on the goals under review: SDG 4, quality education; SDG 5, gender equality; SDG 14, life underwater; and SDG 15, life on land. We welcome your active participation in the discussions and thank you for choosing to share your time with us today. We will begin by framing the session with a 10-minute joint presentation on the key messages and findings from the 2021 Asia-Pacific SDG Partnership Report, and an introduction to the theme of the 2022 SDG Partnership Report by Mr. Bishwa Tiwari, Program Specialist, UN Development Program, and Ms. Smita Nakuda, Senior Results Management Specialist, Asian Development Bank. The floor is yours, Bishwa.
Thank you, Juliet. So, thank you all for participating in session 2. As Juliet mentioned, this presentation has 2 parts. The first part is to share some of the key messages of the 2021 report, and then my colleague Smita from ADB, she will be presenting the theme of the 2022 report. Please allow me, before sharing the key messages of the 2021 SDG report, please allow me to introduce our long-standing partnership among the 3 agencies, ESCAP, ADB, and UNDP. This partnership has been started since the MDG era as early as in 2003. So in that sense, we have almost 2 decades of partnership. This partnership has been started with the objective of enhancing the implementation of the MDG through progress review and follow-up, providing policy suggestions based on the follow-up and review of the MDGs. So during MDG era, we produced 10 MDG progress reports annually. Now, with the end of the MDG We are at the moment now SDG era. So we renewed our partnerships. Now we have a Asia Pacific SDG partnership among the 3 agencies. Now under this partnership, more or less, we have similar objective, but we have broadened our output. Now, in order to help implement the SDG or implementation of 2030 agenda, we generally engage in 3 activities. The first major one is production of the annual reports and the annual HLPF theme, like the one we starting today on 2022. So over the past years, we produced 5 annual thematic reports on the annual HLPF theme. The first one was in 2017 on the theme of eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing Asia Pacific. The last one, which we launched at the APFSD 2021, was on the theme of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, leaving no country behind. Apart from this annual thematic report, we also intermittently work on the outlook report, which look into the progress of the SDGs, but it was done only once in 2017. Now, third one, which is more importantly about the SDG data portal, which provides data, which updates the data of indicators, of SDG indicators. So all these 3 products, the thematic reports, outlook report, as well as SDG data portal, you can find in our SDG Asia Pacific Net web page, which is just below the slide on, which we can note down. So apart from these 3, you also find some other policy briefs and also a joint op-ed issued by the 3 principals of 3 agencies and many other documents. Now, with this, let me go to the findings of the 2021 SDG report. As I said before, the theme of the 2021 report was responding to COVID-19 pandemic, leaving no country behind. So 3 key messages of this report were, you can see on the slide. The first one was the COVID-19, although it is a global pandemic, but its impact was symmetric. So it is an asymmetric shock. Some countries were more impacted than the others, depending upon their socioeconomic background, as well as economic capacity, incentive measures, recovery measures that they put in place to recover from this pandemic. The second one is the digitalization is an important force or powerful force for the transformation of societies and economies. We all know that digitalization has been a powerful tool to fight against COVID, to track, trace, and all, and to ensure our resume some of our economic activities. So in that sense, digitalization was very important tool, but not every country or every population group equally benefited from the digitalization because of the digital divide. So in order to ensure a full benefit from the digitalization, which is very much necessary in coming years too, we need to have equity in digitalization. So all population group, including, by gender, that have an equal access to digitalization. The third one is, yeah, we are living in an era where each and every country are connected. So in this era, we need regional cooperation as well as global cooperation to fight against the new varieties of or new types of risk. We are moving beyond economic to financial crisis to some other sort of crisis, health crisis, environmental crisis. So in this area also we need regional cooperation to so as to leave no country behind, so as to ensure that all the population group can thrive and prosper their life. Now, let me go a couple of more slides. As I pointed out before, that because the country capacity and resources or existing infrastructure or services are different, and because the recovery measures put in place or incentive measures put in place to fight COVID differs across countries. So some countries are able to recover better than the others. So we see there is a risk of K-shaped recovery, where the upper part of the K shows that some countries are recovering better than the lower part of the countries. Such risk of K-shaped recovery you can also find within a country, between the sectors. Some sectors are growing faster, whereas some sectors are not. And partly we see these days, this recovery is also governed by the vaccination coverage. Those countries, generally the better off, they have a higher vaccination coverage, so they are going to recover well ahead of the other countries which have a low vaccination coverage. Now, this is going to increase the, again, inequality between the countries. So this K-shaped recovery is going to increase the inequality between countries as well as between population group within a country. Now, finally, the report also points out the need for regional cooperation, as I mentioned before. Yes, domestic policies, they are very much important. Like we talked before in the opening session as well, that there is a need for social protection, there is a need for digitalization. Yes, all these are necessary. So there's a need for, enhanced domestic policies to promote these so as to build the capacity of the individuals, families, household poor to fight against any crisis. But apart from this, as most of the crisis or pandemic is going to be global in character, only a single country cannot solve. So there is a need for an enhanced, renewed regional cooperation across the countries, among the countries. And this cooperation should not only be in the confines of economic and financial sector, but it also moved beyond those sectors to other social sectors as well as environmental sectors, because the nature of the crisis or shocks are changing over time. So with this, I conclude, and I hand over to my colleague Smita for briefly outlining the 2022 theme of the report. Over to Smita. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishwa, and thank you everyone for participating in this session. The objective of it is really to seek your inputs, perspectives, and experiences to inform our 2022 report, which will explore the theme of the 2022 High-Level Political Forum on advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in spite of the setbacks that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented in many parts of in almost all parts of our region and indeed the globe. So the goal of the 2022 report will be to explore and examine the effects of COVID-19 in our region in more empirical depth. So as Bishwa noted, the 2021 report explored the risks of K-shaped recovery and some of the potential drivers of K-shaped recovery. And the goal of the 2022 report is to look in more detail at the reality of the effects that we are seeing and have observed in our countries, in our region, recognizing the diversity of experiences and circumstances of the various countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Our goal is to highlight good practices that can support a resilient, sustainable, and inclusive recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know many of you are on the front lines of trying to implement efforts that advance these objectives in your communities, in your countries, in the region. So we look forward to hearing from you about those efforts in order to help develop a piece of policy research and support policy dialogue that will identify and enable the implementation of pathways that address inequalities within and between countries in order to help achieve the SDGs. We can move to the next slide, Vishwa. So the key proposed elements of the 2022 report, as I've noted, will be to analyze the underlying factors that have shaped and influenced the ways in which COVID-19 has affected different countries in our region and is shaping recovery trajectories using available data to the extent that we can. And they then propose to draw on country examples and in-depth case studies to highlight these effects and identify the good practices that I alluded to, with a focus on the 2022 high-level High-Level Political Forum priority goals, which Juliette already set out when she introduced this session. But I just thought I would note that we want to look at these goals in the context of the broader themes around SDG attainment that they relate to inclusion, empowerment, and investing in nature, ecosystems, and biodiversity, recognizing the imperative to focus on a green and environmentally sustainable recovery from COVID-19 if we are to achieve the long-term aspirations of the 2030 Agenda. And our goal will be to identify policies and practices that help us address these issues and address inequalities in particular. So really looking forward to hearing your experiences from the Central Asia region so that can inform our understanding and thinking on the options here for the region. Let me close there and hand it back to Juliette.
Thank you both for the background to frame our discussions. Now we will move into a panel where experts in each of the SDGs under review will share a 5-minute introduction to how COVID-19 has affected the SDG of their expertise area, and how these issues have been included or mainstreamed in the COVID-19 recovery measures, as well as any emerging initiatives or examples of good practices in these goal areas. This will set the stage to prepare us before launching into the group discussions in the 4 SDGs under review. Speakers, please keep to the 5-minute timing. I will be keeping time for you and asking you to wrap up after you reach 5 minutes. We will have time to dive into more details later on in the breakout room discussions. With that, I would like to invite our expert on SDG 4, Quality Education, Mr. Rafiz Ubizov, Honorary Director of the Institute for Sustainable Development, named after Ban Ki-moon. The floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me today to talk about education. And I will share my PowerPoint presentation. Specifically, today I will be talking about SDG 4, Sub-Regional Development Priorities for Cooperation and Recovery from COVID-19 and Achieving SDGs. When we talk about education and when we talk about the development, we have to talk about some strengths in Central Asia and North Asia. One of the strengths is very well developed infrastructure for education, a very good access to primary and secondary education. It doesn't mean it's the best. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have any challenges. It has own challenges, its own problems. And under pressure of COVID, of course, we could see decline of the access to primary and secondary education, and we could see declining quality of education. But when we talk about SDGs, so specific targets, we could see that some challenges in achieving SDGs in a couple of very important areas. One is reading and math, basically what we come under umbrella of STEM education. We also could see reducing educational inequality. I will talk about it a bit later, and enrollment and pre-primary education. Because of social changes, economic changes, we could see growing challenges in this particular area. And of course, now we have to talk about quality of teachers training, and it's a very important challenge which we have to think about and address about. When we talk about, again, Central Asia and North Asia, we talk about 3 important shocks. One is economic shock. Second is, I would say, social development shock. And third is governance shock, because we could see shrinking budgets, especially in the field of education, and the needs to invest more in the field of education. When we talk about negative impact of COVID on the education environment, we have to talk about a couple of important areas. First of all, impact on educational inequality. It is a huge challenge because we could see that for almost 2 years, schools, colleges, universities were closed, and digital online education was only option for education. And unfortunately, we could see huge digital divide in this area. Second was on impact on proficiency in reading and math. Again, it's very important skill, set of skills and competences which are increasingly important in post-industrial era, and we need to make sure that okay, let me step back. COVID had a huge negative impact on this particular area. Next issue is gender equality. I know my one of the speakers will be speaking more about it, but again, I would like to highlight that COVID had huge negative impact on gender equality in education. And also, let's talk about one more area, is teachers training. Teachers need to be trained to be sure that they know about challenges of 21st century, challenges of post-industrial development, challenges of service economy, making sure that they prepare young generation for post-COVID or recovery labor market. And it's very important to provide them skills and competences, train them in new skills and competences, making sure that they provide good quality education to younger generation. And talking about the trajectories for resilient and inclusive recovery and implementation of SDGs, we should talk about very important areas. Of course, many issues boil down to economic area, to budgets and available for all these kind of issues. However, we could see that we have to deal with very important issue which actually undermines education, is digital divide within the societies, because different group of societies have different level of access to digital platforms and to digital technologies. Second, we could see huge digital divide between the countries. Some countries have better networks, they have better infrastructure, have better access to technologies, but others unfortunately are not. And unfortunately, we could see from report what our presenters and figures what our presenters talk about today, that COVID-19 had huge impact on economic development and increasing inequality between countries, and what we talk about key shape recovery. So let me move to next topic. What can we do? What kind of instruments and tools we can use to achieve SDGs, and specifically SDG 4? I would put everything under important umbrella, what I call human-centered recovery. It's very important to make sure that we not only talk about figures, not only about numbers, not about dollars or whatever currency we talk about, but we talk about human-centered recovery. In the center of recovery, and all policy recommendations, all policy efforts should be attention to human being, to well-being of different groups of society. Of course, to make sure that we have human-centered recovery, we need economic tools, and we need to mobilize finances for addressing those challenges. We need social tools. We need social tools, making sure that different social groups have, especially social groups in support, in need, especially social groups from remote rural areas. They need better access to education. We talk about technology transfer, about transition to use into employment and recovery. And because I could see that my time is running out, I will run to the final slide. Let me talk a little bit about an example of good practices in Kazakhstan. I will talk specifically about digital online learning system. I believe it's my vision, and from experience, what good practices, what I studied and researched in Kazakhstan and Central Asia, the future of education is in combination of three trends, or let's say three pillars of the future development for education. Number one is digital transition. Number two is gamification, and number three is flexibility. I can talk about these three pillars of future development application a bit later, when if you have time, if you have questions. But good examples could be of combination of three pillars of future development could be seen some best practices in Kazakhstan. One is online mektep, online schools, it's digital platform which covers primary schools and school education in Kazakhstan. Second is digital online learning, which covers university education in general. And we also can talk about blended learning format, especially this academic year. Many universities, many schools move to blended format when you can combine face-to-face learning with digital learning. And number three, we talk about needs for training teachers, making sure they know more about online learning, digital online learning systems, They know more about using new technologies, new opportunities for teaching in their classes, and they deliver better quality education for all. So nobody is left behind at the education system. Thank you very much. And that's it for now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this overview. And now I would like to invite an expert on SDG 5, gender equality, Ms. Mere Mustafina, Women Entrepreneurship Ambassador for Central Asia and CIS. The floor is yours.
Добрый день, дорогие участники сегодняшнего форума. Рада всех
Good
приветствовать.
afternoon, distinguished participants. I'm very glad to welcome you all.
Ситуации женщин-предпринимателей. Да?
Good day, distinguished participants. I would like to talk about the situation with women entrepreneurs. So this is SDG 5, but it relates to women entrepreneurs because I'm an expert in this field working with female entrepreneurs. In Kazakhstan, we have almost 1.5 million SMEs registered. 45% of them are women. So women entrepreneurship is one of the drivers for economic growth. And they've been here in this area for 10 years already. And during the 5 recent years, I can see how it is in this high trend to be an entrepreneurship, to find your own and to incorporate your own business and to develop it. As of 2020, so the number of registered 1.6 million entities, of them, so 45% are women. And in effect, women just work as individual entrepreneurs or micro business, like 80%, 12% LLPs, and 7% farmers. I would say that during the recent 10 years, we have a big increment in this figure. But during the pandemic, of course, women just suffered a lot, including female business. Colleagues, can I ask you to turn off the mic, because I can see that, well, how people are working and just talking. Can you please turn off your mics? Thank you. Thank you so much. Where women are represented mainly. This is a unified statistics. Almost 2/3 of businesses in many countries are represented in education, in catering, accommodation, and trade, including retail trade. So, and of course, this business suffered a lot during the pandemic. So how it happens? Women just incorporate business when they just close or meet their own needs. Like it happens quite often. Women just would like to find good, for example, kindergartens for their children. And quite often they just open kindergartens for their children without any education, without knowing how this business process are going to be developed. And the pandemic just had a severe impact on business, and regrettably, as per female business. So we have no figures for women businesses. We have only total figures. We have like Atomican Entrepreneurship Association's figures, which just shows us that starting from emergency situation and as a result of lockdowns, over 1 million businesses suffered. Of them, more than 430,000 just terminated their activities, operations, which is almost half of businesses. Of them, 15,000 of SMEs have loans or credits with commercial banks, and they just applied for to the banks to postpone their repayments. Over 1.6 million people just were on vacation, were let on vacation without any payment, and of course, so suffered a lot. And so there were governmental measures to support businesses, but the businessmen do not think that those measures were sufficient. So the coverage over the industry and over the sectors were quite weak. Over 50% of the companies thought that those measures were not efficient, because even just to apply for this support, so more than 3 weeks were needed. And so that happened back in 2020. So as talking about the difficulties faced by women businesses, I would like just to highlight the following. Lack of knowledge, quality knowledge about business processes, how to build them. I'm just an expert in business methodology and transformation leadership programs, and I often see how women are quite chaotic to running business based on intuition, just based on some surface or knowledge. Surface touching knowledge, and so they have to streamline algorithm of their operations, professional activities to look for parallel information and just to fight this, fires, like firefighting activities, kind of. And there is a big issue which is typical for the entire region in Kazakhstan: lack of time, which is in spite of the society's traditions, societal traditions. So a woman should not only be an entrepreneur, but just to run housework and to take care of children. And of course, during the pandemic in this format, the pandemic just deteriorated and complicated many processes. And they're mother of 4 children and an entrepreneur. I can say how I suffered. So big emotional stress, and many women of our business community and the women that I know, so they just suffered emotionally back in 2020 when they were forced to stay in this confined, just space, to be a mother, to be a spouse, to a wife, to be a doctor, to be a teacher, and still streamline her business processes, because the risks associated with responsibility is a must, or are a must. And the big challenge is when you are an entrepreneur, you are a woman, and so there is a big choice. There is a dilemma, either to select family, or to choose your family or your enterprise. And quite often, this is up for this is in favor of, the choice is in favor of the family, and it cannot just have certain negative impact on business. And there is a big barrier, availability or lack of finance. And so it has been discussed for many years. So this is urgent not only for female businesses, but for all entrepreneurs. So we all face difficulties in finance during 5 years. So the volume of SME finance shrink, and in particular, women entrepreneurs are more inclined to look for finance in microfinancial organizations rather than in commercial banks. Why women apply to financial organizations? Because of the financial lack of financial literacy, and they apply to microfinance organizations in spite of this high interest. I just had a survey among the women entrepreneurs who have been running their business more than 3 years. So these are women who work in business for many years, and they asked what changes they faced during the pandemics, and the answers or responses were quite similar. And so optimization of business process happened. So because they were thinking about time and money, and they had to select what was most important for their business. All long-term plans were terminated, and the business needed to survive in that situation. Second, accelerating communication processes and shrinking of the decision-making chains with their partners. A lot of education and training, online training, and even before the pandemic, so women just went to apply to online programs, training programs, but that was the trend during the pandemic, because they had to be trained to learn and to implement their knowledge at the same time. But so the women who managed to reform their business, so now they have the turnover growth by 30%. So reformatting they work with the teams. So that was quite important from the point of view of psychological aspect. So this remote work, everybody just responded that there was some emotional stress and lack, maybe so many lost values and sense. And quite often, so women were reoriented. If they managed to do that, they just evidence, they provided, they just evidence growth even in spite of the pandemic. And that also caused unification of our society. We just exchanged information, we shared information, we had no feeling that we are competitors, though we had women from competitive sectors, but still we were united because everybody had the information which could help another person. So understanding the trends and automation of the processes. We had, so women tried to automate the process to the maximum extent. And require online recruitment and online management, so which had not happened prior to the pandemic. Now we could understand that the efficiency of workforce does not depend on the
Could you wrap up, please?
Так, спасибо. В принципе, это практически...
In effect, that's the end of my presentation. So, so there was a need that grew just to make for fast decision making with very limited inputs. So that was responded by women as per pandemic impact on them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And for all of the details, I'm sure there'll be interest in even more details in the breakout session. I know it's hard in only 5 minutes, so this short time with much to cover. I request speakers to speak slowly for the sake of the interpreters. And as we transition to the next speaker, I will launch a poll. I would like to invite our speaker expert on SDG 14, Mr. Sirik Bugmanagdutov, the authorized representative of Kazakhstan, Executive Committee of the International Fund for Saving the Aros Sea. The floor is yours.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good day, distinguished colleagues. Welcome all of you. Thank you for the organizers for this invitation to take part. It's quite unusual to shift from education, gender equality to SDGs 14, 15, and which are quite important. In Northern and Central Asia, so faces specific problems and issues in achievement SDG 14, life on the water, and this incorporates an issue of the Aral Sea, which faces such negative issues and trends as climate change and the lack of water resources that feed the Aral Sea, Amudarya and Sirdarya, desertification issues, and shrinkage of biodiversity. Sorry, the sound is very low. So, but the Aral Sea is actually a lake because it is landlocked, and but due to the big scale, it is called sea. So drying of the Aral Sea just started back in early 60s, and now the area of the Aral Sea just makes only 10% of the former one. It was the issue was discussed in different platforms of UN, but the issue has not been resolved. But we hope that it will be resolved within the forthcoming 10 years. So we need to minimize the negative impact. So the countries of the Caspian Sea Russian Federation, Iran, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan just signed a memorandum on protection of the Caspian Sea during the current year, and in accordance with the convention.
В 1993 году 5 стран Центральной Азии
In 1993, 5 countries of Central Asia has established International Aros Salvation Fund in order to overcome the environmental crisis in the Aral Sea Basin. In 2008, the UN General Assembly adopted a the status of observer at the General Assembly. That is why our fund is a unique cooperation platform in the region. One of the main tasks of our fund is restoration of the ecosystem balance in the region. First of all, we're talking about Amudarya and Sirdarya river basins and the dried sea bottom, establishing a new ecosystem there. This is a quote from a program on joint activities on Aral Sea environmental improvement and providing social and economic development to the Aral Sea as of 1993, signed by the head of Central Asian states. And the point number 14 is linked with SDG 15 on the life on land and life on the sea. In Dushanbe this year, there was a meeting of the International Aral Salvation Fund at the level of prime ministers who are in charge of water and environmental issues, established a new program of actions to support Aral Sea countries. This is the 4th program until 2005. And also our countries developed in 2022. Since 2022, they will start implementation of the regional program on environmental protection for sustainable development, COSUR. This is until 2030. The reconciliation process has been completed between the member states. We managed to save Aral. In 2005, we built a 13-kilometer stock Aral dam in the framework of Aral reconstruction near the river Sirdarya. Because of these activities, Aral has been split into north and south parts. The south part belongs to the bigger Aral. Unfortunately, big Aral is shrinking progressively because in Amudarya there is not enough water coming into the southern part of Aral. In the North Aral, the sea level had been raised by 12 meters and the total surface of water increased by 27 square kilometers, salinity of water decreased, biodiversity had been improved, 14 previously disappeared fish species had been spotted now in the northern part. We also managed to improve sanitary and hygiene around there. The decrease of infectious diseases had been noticed as well. Up to 7,000 to 10,000 tons. That was the fish catch with the fresh water fish species, and we import this species with this fish to the neighboring country, including Germany. Also, we have to manage that the small Aral part was included into the water wetlands, which is covered by International Ramsar Convention, which is aimed at protecting the animal life in wetlands. More than 2,000 migrating birds crossing this area. In 2020, there was a commissioning of a special fish protection facility constructed with the help of German Development Fund, GIZ. Because of this facility, several millions of small fish were preserved and protected. They are not perished in big waters, but remained in a small Aral territory, and hence biodiversity is maintained. I think, based on my opinion, one of the main problems is climate change and decrease of water of those rivers which are feeding Aral Sea. Due to the global warming, the seagrass is blossoming in a bigger scale. The decrease of oxygen was spotted by 5.5% on the surface and almost 18% less oxygen in the deeper waters. This is because of high temperatures of water, because oxygen retention qualities of warmer waters is significantly less than colder waters, which may impact badly on animal and fish life there. Also, we have to focus on the higher level of the blue-green water grass. As a result, the quality of drinking, the quality of water is deteriorating, and the water is practically undrinkable. We also have to be focused on decreasing water intake from the rivers, and we have more and more focus on improving quality of waters due to less irrigation intake and improving the quality of waters coming into the Aral Sea and the upper Sirdarya basin. We have uranium production, for instance, since the former Soviet Union, and this is one of the main source of pollution, and this contaminated water coming to Aral. The final point which I would like to mention, that we have to implement two programs, especially environmental programs, which are focusing on actions against desertification and land degradation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I've now closed the poll, and I would like to invite our final panelist and expert on SDG 15, Life on Land, Mr. Zafar Makhmudov, Executive Director of the Regional Environmental Center for Central Asia. The floor is yours, and you may share your screen.
Because of the
Уважаемые участники, уважаемые организаторы, меня зовут Людмила Киртенко.
Distinguished participants, my name is Lyudmila Kirtenko, because the executive director is unable to join us due to his participation in a simultaneous event. I would like to make a presentation on his behalf with your kind permission. Can you see my presentation now? Just just a sec. I will share my screen.
Yes, we can see now.
Окей. Great, thank you. Итак, значит, наша презентация.
So our presentation is actually focusing on SDG number 15, but we also realized that all environmental SDGs are equally important. All what I will talk about will refer to other environmental SDGs as well. How COVID pandemic impact on SDG 15? We know that environmental network, environmental system is always considered as the source of free resources for economy. Taking into consideration the level of environmental degradation in Central Asia, most of the countries are focusing on green economy, introduction of sustainable production and consumption, and consequently developed the Central Asian economies developed respective environmental plans for green development. Unfortunately, the pandemic made its negative impact on these plans, and hence more focus is given to health, social issues, the issues of preservation of businesses and protection of national economies in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. Undoubtedly, this had an impact on the progress of implementation of these events, as well as our plans to transfer to green economy. Nevertheless, with the assistance of the regional initiative in the framework of convention, UN Convention against desertification, we developed 5 regional and 2 regional strategies with the corresponding action plans, which are designed to mitigate land degradation from droughts and sand dust storms in Central Asian region. In addition to this, our agency is supporting this process of organizing Central Asian Pavilion at COP26, where Central Asia will demonstrate their joint activities in this regard. In this regard, we also have launched the Central Asian Climate Information Platform, and there is a ongoing discussion in the region on regional cooperation mechanism to work with direct foreign investments in order to support both economic and social development. And of course, all those things should be done without negative impact on environment. What are key policy recommendations to drive recovery and combating land degradation in an inclusive manner, including the issues associated with the protection of environmental systems in general? There are nothing new here. We're talking about modern technologies and methods of combating the land degradation, strengthening the strategic and institutional foundations of governance and the individual capacity of specialists in the regional countries in order to have these technologies and approaches to become more useful. Of course, it is also very important to think even more about interaction between the governmental agencies and to improve integration, both governmental agencies, various departments and representatives of various sectors should join their forces in the framework of the regional dialogue platform. We also would like to start regional cooperation to attract investments for the sake of national programs and separate investment projects on the framework of the public-private partnership, the PPP. And this is it on my behalf, and I'm ready to give more details in our joint discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your background, and we look forward to more details in the breakout sessions. So that leads me to the next part of this session. And I would like to thank again all of the panelists. And I hope this panel has left our participants eager to discuss in more depth in the breakout rooms. So this is now the interactive portion of the session to enable deeper discussion on each of the SDGs under review. We will have 4 breakout rooms. There will be 2 simultaneously. So we'll have SDG 4 and 14 in parallel in the first 30 minutes, and then SDGs 5 and 15 in subsequent for another 30 minutes. You'll be able to select the room of your choice by either remaining here in the main room for SDG 4 or clicking on the link that will appear shortly in the chat to join the discussion on SDG 14. UN resident coordinator offices and country representatives will host and kick off the discussions, help animate them, and reflect on the discussions and key messages when we all return to the breakout room. I'm very pleased to welcome Ms. Anna Platonova, Head of Office and Senior Economist at the Office of UN Resident Coordinator in Georgia for SDG 4 as a moderator, and Ms. Aina Seydzeva, Head of Office of UNFPA Turkmenistan, for the group on SDG 5, sorry. And then Ms. Rushan Jilmanit, Development Coordination Officer, Partnerships and Development Finance in the Office of the Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan, who will be moderating SDG 14. And Mr. Rovshan Mnomromanadov, UNDP Assistant Resident Representative in Turkmenistan in SDG 15. There will also be co-hosts from the Asia-Pacific SDG Partnership to facilitate the discussion with some guiding questions. We encourage you to share your insights, examples of good practices, and actively use the chat. There will be simultaneous interpretation in all of the breakout groups, and we will also be using some more polls in the breakout rooms as well. So we are now sharing the link. And the discussions will last for 30 minutes each as we're a bit behind time. So please keep to time as you move to the rooms. And then you may choose your next breakout room after the first discussion as guided by the hosts and co-hosts. So my colleagues are here to assist. If you have any problems getting into or out of any of the breakout rooms. So SDG 14 will be in the link that's shared. You can see it in the chat. My colleague Agapi has shared it. If you follow that link, you will go to SDG 14. And if you want to stay in the room to discuss SDG 4, those will be the first 2. So
Juliet, there is some question in the chat box. So when are you going to share the link for SDG 5 and 15? There will be no link. 5 and 15
will be in these same rooms, but afterwards. So we'll share the links in each respective room for you to switch if you want to switch. So we'll share the instructions. The first 2 are 4 in this room, and then 14 in the link that that my colleague shared.
Okay.
Thank you, Juliet. So it means that, sorry, does it mean that the rest of us who will go to 14 will have to leave this room, right?
Yes, we leave this room and go to another, and then we can come back if we want to return to, and at the end of all the breakout room discussions, we'll all be back in this link, and we'll share the links when we come close to the end of